This is an exercise in wet with little area that we are controlling without adding water. So these are two poles in a jungle, you can say, almost. It's an abandoned estate jungle, something that is in my mind. And though I'm using blue for the sky, but it moves down, and I'm wetting the whole paper, just leaving those two white poles alone. A creamy consistency of lemon yellow. Whatever brush strokes, random, I can just go over it. The paint is going to blend itself into one unified shape, since the entire thing is wet and the paint is still blending into itself. Little dark behind that. I'm only concerned about the variation of color and variation of tone here. I'm not very specific with particular shapes. Of course, I have in mind the trees which are in the distance, the foliage. But I'm not too concerned about the exactness of the shapes. But the transition of colors and transition of tones, and which is blending itself. A little spatter and sprinkles here and there, they are also going to get blurred into the whole thing. Whenever we say wet in wet, there are so many factors that affect what the final effect is going to be. Like how much water there is on the paper at that point whenever we are putting any paint, what is the thickness of the paint, and above it, the humidity, that the natural humidity during that time, that is going to affect it really, really much, which is not in our control. So what I mean to say is, the effects are almost every time rather unpredictable. Okay, with practice you know certainly that how it's going to happen, but you can never know what exactly is going to happen. And as speaking for myself, I think this is the biggest advantage of watercolor, that I really don't know what is going to happen. So this is the mystery which I am solving and which always keeps my interest going in the painting. Some thicker paints pattered into a wet wash blends itself, creating a three-dimensional effect, if you notice. This is a tissue roll. I'm just trying to control the outside areas. See, my intention is not to cover the entire paper. I'm leaving the white spaces around just as a compositional element. After the paper has completely dried now, I'm adding tiny details. The whole point here is there is something which has happened on the paper. Okay, and my intention is just to give a direction to whatever has happened on the paper. Now these are little tiny indications of the trees you can see, which is giving definition to the tonal mass which is behind, making you think that it's a tree in the background, tree in the foreground. And these are little branches, twigs. The only thing I'm worried here is that I'm not working too much or tampering any of the effect that is already there. My entire intention is to superimpose just the definitions. If you notice, I have done more work in the foreground, less in the background, so that foreground is a sharper area that we can focus on, while the background is a relatively blur looking areas. Now I have taken a cobalt blue, thin cobalt blue, and over those dry two poles. This is the shadow portion of the white pole. See, blue blended with a kind of warmer tone looks like a shadow on the white surface. Like the shadow on the white surface, as we might think it should be grey, but there are always so many reflected lights on that white portion which is in the shadow. So that reflected, what reflects is the blue of the sky and whatever is around it, giving it a color by itself. Whenever I have a rigor in mind, I always think of something in this corner of the painting and in any other corner of the painting. I keep on moving from in the entire area, doing something or the other. A little crimson red mixed with little green, giving it a touch of rusted. This was a cast iron rusted gate which I had actually seen there some time back. This is a scene from my memory. Okay. So I had seen an abandoned estate with just two poles popping from the trees around. And I remember that a wrought iron gate with a rusted look. And just notice in the entire painting, except for the shadows on the poles, there is no mass which I have painted on the previous wash. And that's the end.